Alright, you've done the groundwork and you've learned that evolution isn't just a theory, but a rock solid, evidence backed explanation for the entire history of life. And you've seen that deep inside every living thing is a code, DNA, that spells out the instructions for what it is. And you know that in individual words in that code called genes are what get passed from one generation to the next. But knowing all that is like having a dictionary without knowing how sentences work. How does life take these basic genetic building blocks and create, well, everything? And how do you get from a simple code to the staggering variety of creatures that have ever existed on this planet? We're done with the what and we are jumping headfirst into the how. We are about to pull back the curtain on the engines of evolution, the real observable processes that take the raw material of DNA and forge it into the epic story of life. First, we need to understand where the game of evolution is actually played. Here's a hint: it's not with the individual. An individual is born, lives, and dies with the exact same set of genes. You personally do not evolve. The real action happens at the level of the population, a whole group of the same species interacting with each other. And think of it this way: every individual in a population has a set of genes, but for many of those genes, there are different versions or flavours called alleles. And in a field of pea plants, for instance, there might be an allele for purple flowers and an allele for white flowers. The collection of all the alleles for all of the genes in the population is its gene pool. At its core, evolution is just a change in how common these alleles are in a population over time. It's that simple. If over several generations the purple flower allele in our pea plants becomes more frequent and the white allele gets rarer, that population has evolved. So what causes these frequencies to change? Four main forces are at play. Firstly, natural selection. This is the headliner, the one you've heard of, but it's often misunderstood. Natural selection isn't a random process, it's the logical outcome when three conditions are met: variation, heritability, and differential success. First, variation. We already know that individuals in a population are different. Our pea plants have different coloured flowers. A bunch of beetles might have some green individuals and some brown ones. This variation is the raw material. Second, heritability. These different traits can be passed down from parents to kids. Purple flowered plants tend to have purple flowered offspring. Brown beetles tend to have brown beetle babies. If a trait cannot be inherited, evolution cannot see it. And third, and this is the kicker, differential survival and reproduction. In any environment, some inherited traits will be more helpful than others. Imagine our beetle population lives on the dark bark of a tree. The brown beetles are better camouflaged, so they are less likely to be eaten by birds. The green beetles, however, stick out like a sore thumb and get eaten more often. Because the brown beetles are more likely to survive, they're more likely to reproduce and pass on their brown colour alleles. Over time, the brown allele will become more common in the population, while the green allele will decrease. Population adapts. That is natural selection. It's not the beetles tried to become brown. The variation was already there. The environment just acted as a filter, selecting the individuals that by chance were a better fit. The classic real-world example is the peppered moth in industrial England. Before the Industrial Revolution, light-coloured moths blended in perfectly with lichen on trees. But as factories sought to blacken the landscape, a rare dark-coloured version of the moth suddenly had the advantage. The frequency of the dark-coloured allele shot up. Decades later, when the population was reduced, the trees became light again. The selection pressure flipped, and the light-coloured moth made a comeback. Natural selection isn't a march towards perfection. It's a constant, dynamic dance with a changing world. If natural selection is the logical editor of life's story, genetic drift is the element of pure dumb luck. Genetic drift is the change in allele frequencies due to random chance, and it's most powerful in small populations. It doesn't lead to adaptation because the changes have nothing to do with how well suited an organism is to its environment. Let's go back to our beetles, but this time both brown and green beetles survive equally well. One day someone walks through the forest and accidentally steps on a few beetles. By sheer chance they squish 3 green ones and only 1 brown one. The next generation will have more brown alleles, not because brown is better, but just because of who got squished. That's genetic drift. 2 classic scenarios highlight genetic drift's power. The first is the bottleneck effect, and this happens when a population gets drastically smaller because of random events like a fire or a plague, and the few survivors who make it through this bottleneck might, by pure chance, have a very different mix of alleles than the original population. Genetic diversity plummets and the new gene pool is defined by the lucky few. And the second is the founder effect. This happens when a small group breaks off from a larger population to start a new one, like colonizing an island. This new founding group is unlikely to have the same allele frequencies as the original population. If our mainland beetle population is 90% brown and 10% green, but the 2 beetles that happen to get washed away to a new island are both green, well, the new island population is now 100% green. It's not because green was better, it's just about who happened to be on the raft. Genetic drift is a great reminder that not all evolutionary change is for the better. Sometimes it's just a roll of the dice. We're tackling some of the biggest ideas in biology here. If you're finding this useful, do me a favour and hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more curious people like you. And if you want to be sure you don't miss what comes next, be sure to subscribe. Our third mechanism, gene flow, is also known as migration. This one's pretty intuitive. It's just the movement of alleles from one population to another. When individuals move to a new population and successfully reproduce, they bring their alleles with them, mixing them into the new gene pool. Imagine 2 populations of flowers on opposite sides of a mountain. One population is almost all red and the other is almost all yellow. If a bird carries pollen from the red population over to the yellow one, it introduces red flower alleles. This directly changes the allele frequencies in the yellow population. Unlike genetic drift, which can make separate populations more different, gene flow tends to make them more similar. By mixing their gene pools, it can prevent populations from splitting off into new species. Gene flow is a force that connects different groups, keeping them one large intermingling species. Our last mechanism is a special and often very flashy case of natural selection. It's called sexual selection. And while natural selection is about survival and reproduction, sexual selection is all about reproduction. It's a process where certain traits improve an individual's chances of finding a mate, even if those same traits are bad for survival. Think of a peacock's tail. A massive shimmering train is a huge energy drain to grow and makes the male peacock a very obvious target for predators. From a survival standpoint, it's a terrible idea. So why have it? Because peahens prefer to mate with males who have the most magnificent tails, and the disadvantage for survival is crushed by the overwhelming advantage in reproduction. A male who lives a short life but fathers dozens of chicks is a bigger evolutionary winner than one who lives a long life but never mates. Sexual selection generally works in 2 ways. The first is intrasexual selection, competition within the same sex. This is usually male-to-male combat. Think of 2 stags locking antlers or elephant seals battling over a beach. Traits that lead to victory, like large size or big horns, get passed on because the winners get all the mates. The second is intersexual selection, which is between the sexes, and is better known as a mate choice. This is where one sex, usually females, chooses their mate based on specific features. This drives the evolution of things like elaborate courtship dances, bright colours and complex bird songs. These traits are basically advertisements signalling to the female that the male has good genes and is a worthy father of her offspring. Sexual selection explains some of the weirdest and most beautiful features in the natural world, and it shows that the drive to reproduce can be just as powerful as the drive to survive. So, those are the four engines of evolution: natural selection, the non random process that creates adaptation; genetic drift, the outsized role of random chance, especially in small populations; gene flow, the mixing of genes between populations through migration; and sexual selection, the special case where being attractive can be more important than just staying alive. These four forces don't work in a vacuum. Any population are all tugging and pulling on the gene pool. Evolution isn't just one simple thing, it's a complex dance between chance and selection, migration and mating. It's the gradual change of the genetic makeup of a population, generation by generation. You've gone from the what to the how. You now understand the fundamental processes that have shaped life on Earth for billions of years, from the very first replicating molecule to the mind-boggling diversity we see all around us. And with this knowledge, the whole living world starts to look a little different. Every wing, every eye, every leaf tells a story written by these very mechanisms. If you haven't seen my other videos on this topic yet, please check my playlist on evolution. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.